Hello and welcome back to this basic biblical Greek course. We're looking at lesson 4 today, and on the screen before you now is an overview of the content for this lesson. So as you can see, we'll start with the present, middle, passive, indicative verb endings. Afterwards, we will move on to the second declension neuter nouns. So previously we looked at the second declension masculine nouns, and now we're doing the neuter genders. Thereafter we'll look at something called concord and discord. After that we will learn our new vocabulary for this lesson, and then practicing our vocab and the various principles that we've learned in this lesson, we'll do some translation work together. So once again, we've got a lot to cover and not enough time, so let's get going. In the previous lesson, we learned the present active indicative verb forms. So as you can see today, we're looking at the present middle passive indicative verb forms. So let's take an overview of what we're doing today. The present speaks of the tense, which is related to the imperfective verbal aspect, where the author is communicating action that is ongoing or in process. Then the middle passive is the voice, and we learned in the previous lesson that the active voice is where the subject is doing the action. So today I will explain the middle and passive to you, and I will do that shortly. But what I'd like to just say now is that the middle passive verb forms are the same. So that's going to help us with memorizing the paradigms. And then finally, the indicative speaks of the mood, and the indicative mood is the mood of assertion. And it is also the only mood where time is significant. So today we're looking at the present, middle, passive, indicative verb forms. Let's speak now about what middle and passive voice mean. Let's begin with the middle voice. As it says here, the middle voice is sometimes difficult for students of Greek to grasp because there is not an English equivalent. All right, so in English we have an active and a passive voice, but we don't have a middle voice. And in the second lesson of the series, when I was introducing the voices to you, we learned that the middle voice is where the subject acts for itself or in its own interest. All right, so that is a simple way to think of the middle voice at this point. It's where the subject acts for itself or for its own interest. And here is an example of one use of the middle voice from Matthew 27 verse 5, where it speaks about Judas, and it says Judas went out and hanged himself. In other words, Judas, the subject, acted for himself in his own interest. The passive voice, on the other hand, is when the subject receives the action. So in the second lesson, I gave the simple example, I am blessed by God, where the action of blessing is done by the agent, God. So God is the one blessing the subject, I. So take a look at this example from Scripture, Matthew 1 verse 22, that states, what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. So in this verse, the subject is what is spoken. And what is spoken is done by an agent. And in this case, two agents, the Lord and the prophet. And so I really appreciate the commentary given by Kostenberger, Merkel, and Plummer, where they help to explain these two different agents. So listen to what they say. This verse offers a good comparison of the two different types of agency. The ultimate agent is by the Lord, hupakurio, because prophecy, right, so that's the subject in this verse, ultimately comes from God. The intermediate agent is through the prophet, dia tu prophetu, because prophets are those who communicate God's word to the people. All right, so the direct agent would be the prophet who is speaking the prophecy, speaking the words, but ultimately those words come from the Lord. Now that you have a better understanding of the middle and passive voices, let me now introduce you to the present, middle, passive, indicative personal endings. So in this table, we have the person and the number, which is communicated by the personal endings. The first person singular is my, second person singular, psi, third person singular, tai, first person plural, metha, second person plural, isthe, and third person plural, ntai. Let's take a look at these in more detail. What I'd like to do now is explain to you some of the modifications that have taken place in the present, middle, passive, indicative personal endings. And essentially, as you're going to see, there's only one modification that has taken place. All the others have stayed the same. So the PE in this table stands for personal endings. And now you are familiar with them. The singulars are my, psi, and tai, and the plural, metha, isthe, and ntai. The stem that we are using again to learn these endings is lu, which means to loose and sometimes can mean to destroy. We also have the connecting vowels again. So the omicron is found before the mu or the nu, as is the case with the first person singular, the first person plural, and the third person plural. All the others will then have the epsilon as the connecting vowel. And then we have the endings. So the first person singular is lu a my, the second person singular is lu e psi, third person singular lu e tai, first person plural lu a metha, second person plural lu esthe, and third person plural lu on tai. So you'll notice that there aren't many modifications. In fact, all of them have remained the same. So that is the first person singular, lu a mai, third person singular, lu e tai, first person plural, lu a metha, second person plural, lu esthe, and third person plural, lu on tai. The only one that has undergone a modification is the second person singular, which has gone from lu e psi to lu a. So let's take a look at how that took place. What I'd like to now explain to you is the modification of lu e psi, which is the second person singular form. So we've learned that psi is the true ending, and when attached to a stem and a connecting vowel, we end up with lu e psi. The problem, however, is that this is not the form that is found in the Bible. The form that is found in the Bible is lu a, as we see at the bottom here. So how has this modification taken place? Well, the first thing to understand is that lu e psi, the sigma, has dropped off. We are then left with the stem, lu, the connecting vowel e, and the personal ending I. The second thing to understand is that the connecting vowel, the epsilon, and the vowel of the personal ending alpha have contracted. Now, we haven't learned any of the contraction rules yet, and we will do so at a later stage. But all you need to be aware of right now is that they've contracted according to the rules. And the rule says that when these two vowels meet each other, they contract to form the lengthened vowel, the eta. So that's why we have the eta there. And the iota has become a iota subscript. So now we're left with our modified second person singular verb ending lu a, the one that is found in the scriptures and the one that we need to memorize. Let's summarize the modified present middle passive endings with luo. The first person singular is lu are my. Second person singular is lu a. Just remember that the true ending is psi, but we are going to learn it as lu a, as per the explanation that I gave previously. The third person singular is lu e tai. First person plural, lu are metha. Second person plural, lu este. Third person plural, lu on tai. Let me say those one more time for you. Singulars first, lu are mai, lu a, lu e tai. And the plurals, lu are metha, lu este, and lu on tai. Sometimes the middle passive verb endings can be a challenge to remember. And so anytime we can find a memory device or tool to assist us with learning these endings, then I believe we need to use them. And in this case, this man that you see on the screen, his name is Dr. Robert Plummer, an excellent Greek scholar and teacher. He is now going to give you a memory device that I'm sure will help you to remember these endings.
Little memory device for the present middle passive indicative endings. I want you to imagine that you're in a church, and this is not too hard to imagine, that there's some youth in the church that are pressing the boundaries of attire. Imagine this guy comes in dressed all in black. You're like, what's this guy's attitude? Does he think he's Johnny Cash or something? Then you see this atrocious white tie, right? Now you see him come in, you think, oh my, oh my. Then you look, you go, a tie. And then you look more closely, and this is a Baptist church, and there's John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, on the tie. You say, a Methodist on the tie. Amatha esta on tie. Methodist on the tie. These are the endings for the present middle passive indicative. Let's say them again. So if you see the guy come in, oh my, a tie. A Methodist on the tie. Amatha on tie. Oh my, a tie. Amatha on tie. Hopefully that'll help you remember it.
Let us now practice conjugating the present middle passive indicative of luo. So let me write down the stems for us first, which is lu. And let's try and conjugate these endings using the memory device that Robert Plummer just gave us. So we see a man walking in the church who's wearing a tie, and we say, oh my, a tie. So lu mai, lu a, lu e tie. And what do we see on the tie? We see a picture of John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church. So metha este on tie. So a metha este on tie. A method este on tie. All right, so I hope that memory device will assist you with learning these endings. Now that we have learned the verb endings, the next thing we need to consider is how do we translate the middle passive indicative verb endings. Let me shorthand this quickly. All right, so the indicative mood is the mood of assertion where a statement is made. The middle passive voice, the middle voice, is where the subject acts in its own interest or for itself, whereas the passive voice is where the subject receives the action of the verb. And then the present tense is related to the imperfective verbal aspect again. And using this diagram, that is when the author or speaker is telling us about the kind of action that is ongoing or in process, and therefore we need to translate it as such. So let's begin with how we would translate luo with the middle voice. So the first person singular, lu are mai, we would translate as I am loosing for myself. The second person singular, lu a, we would translate as you are loosing for yourself. Third person singular, lou et I, we would translate as he, she, it is loosing for itself. The first person plural, lou metha, we would translate as we are loosing for ourselves. Then lou este, translate that as you are loosing for yourselves. And finally, the third person plural, lou antai, we would translate as they are loosing for themselves. I think you get the idea. The subject is always acting in its own interest or for itself. And now, how would we translate luo with the passive voice? I'll take a look at this table with me. The first person singular, lu mai, we would translate as I am being loosed. The second person singular, lu a, we would translate that as you are being loosed. Third person singular, lu etai, as he, she, it is being loosed. The first person plural, lu metha, we would translate that as we are being loosed. The second person plural, lu este, you would translate that as you are being loosed. And then the third person plural, lu antai, we would translate that as they are being loosed. So in summarizing the present middle passive endings with luo, the forms are the same for the middle and the passive. So it's always going to be lu mai, lu a, lu etai, lu metha, lu este, lu antai. The only difference is the way you would translate them. And that will be dependent on the context. So let's say, for example, we have lu a in a verse. We would translate it with the middle voice as you are loosing for yourself with the middle voice, and the passive voice, you are being loosed. And so we would have to ask ourselves which one best fits the context, the middle voice or the passive voice, and then make our decision how we are going to translate it. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, don't fret right now. We will do some translation practice work at the end of this lesson. I can't believe how fast this lesson is going by. But now that we have gone through the middle passive verb endings, it's now time to turn our attention to nouns again. So let's remind ourselves of the three different types of noun declensions that we get. We get the first declensions, which are characterized by the feminine gender because their stem ends with an alpha or an eta. The second declension nouns have a masculine or a neuter gender because their stems end with an omicron. So in the previous lesson, we looked specifically at the masculine genders, and today we are going to now look at the neuter second declension genders. And then finally, we have the third declension nouns, which can be any gender, and their stems end with a consonant. So let's take a look at the neuter genders together. Let's begin with the articles first and take a look at the second declension neuter gender articles. If you remember, we always begin with a case in the following order: the nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative. And we'll look at the singular forms first and then the plurals. So let me help you with the pronunciation of these articles. The nominative singular is ta, genitive, tu, dative, to, accusative, ta. Let me say those for you again. The singulars, nominative, ta, genitive, tu, dative, to, accusative, ta. Then the plural forms, the nominative, ta, genitive, tone, dative, tois, accusative, ta. One more time, ta, tone, toys, and ta. Let me just point out some similarities for you. All the nominative and accusative forms are identical. So that is the nominative singular and the accusative singular are the same, and the nominative plural and accusative plurals are the same. So that should help you with your memorization of these articles. Let's take a step back for a minute or two to compare the masculine and neuter articles. So in the previous lesson, we learned the masculine articles. Let me remind you of those. The singulars first. We have ha, tu, to, and ton. And the plural forms, hoi, tone, tois, and tus. And now recently, we learned the neuter articles. And those again, starting with the nominative singular, are ta, tu, to, and ta. And the plural forms, ta, tone, tois, and ta. So let me point out some of the similarities between these two articles. The biggest similarities are that the genitive and dative singular and plural forms are identical. So let me circle those for you. So the genitive singulars are both tu, and the dative singulars are to. And that also goes for the plural forms. So the genitive plural is tone, and the dative plural is tois. So that should aid you in memorizing these sets of articles. Now that we have looked at the articles, let me introduce you to the second declension, neuter endings. So these are the true endings before they are attached to a stem with connecting vowels. So the singular endings, beginning with the nominative, is the nu, the genitive is the upsilon, dative is the iota, and accusative is the nu. Right, so notice there that the nominative singular and accusative singular are identical. And then the plural endings, nominative is alpha, the genitive is omega nu, dative iota sigma, and accusative plural is the alpha. And once again, notice that the nominative and accusative endings are identical. Let's now take a look at the endings when they are attached to a stem. And so the example that we are going to use is the word teken, which means child. All right, so that is the stem of the noun. And as you can see, the endings match the article. All right, so the tu matches the u in the genitive, the to in the dative, nominative plurals, the genitive plural, the dative plural, and the accusative plural. Right, the only ones that don't match are the nominative singular and the accusative singular, where we have the additional nu that is attached to the end of the stem. All right, so once again, just want to implore you and encourage you to learn the articles. The articles always agree with the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, and case. So if you've learned the articles, most of the work is done, and that will really assist you with declining the nouns. So as we did with the verbs, when we practice conjugating the present, middle passive, indicative verb forms, let's practice now declining the second declension noun using the example of tek, non, ta. Alright, so we will begin by writing out the articles. So you should be aware of them by now. Let me do it for you. So we have ta, to, toe. Remember, it's got the yod as subscript beneath it, and ta. Remember that the nominative singular and the accusative singular are identical. And then the plurals, we have ta, tone, tois, and ta. And once again, the nominative plural and the accusative plural are identical. Let's now add our endings to the stem. So I've included the connecting vowel for us. So let's now add the actual ending. Remember, the nominative and accusative singulars have the new at the end, and then the rest pretty much will match the article. So we have here u, o, the plurals tekna, teknon, teknois, and tekna. Alright, so get a piece of paper out, write this table out, and practice declining the second declension noun by yourself.
Second declension, you're a cinch. I will learn you in a pinch. Most are masculine or neuter nouns. Os, oo, o, and on. Single endings for masculine declension. Second declension. Oi, on, ois, and oos. Plural endings, you silly goose. Declension. A second declension. Hey, declension, second one. I wish they all could be so fun. You take mostly neuter and masculine nouns. And now here we go with the neuter ending forms. Genitive and dative are just like before. On, oo, o, and on. Single ending neuter forms declension. Second declension. On, ois, and plural ending neuter forms declension. A second declension. Hey, declension, second one. I wish they all could be so fun. You take mostly neuter and masculine nouns. Nominative and accusative try to trip you up a bit. Those neuter forms can be kind of rough. Second declension, you're a cinch. I will learn you in a pinch. Most are masculine or neuter nouns.
Before I introduce you to your new vocab and do some translation work with you, I'd like to explain two important terms to you. The first one is concord. So it says there, for the most part, the Greek verb will agree with the subject of the sentence in both person and number. So when there is agreement, this is known as concord. So here's an example from James 1 verse 19, where James says, you believe that God is one. You are doing well. Even the demons believe and they shudder. So here is a portion from the Greek text. So I've underlined daimonia, which is demons, and pisteusin, which is believe. So we see here that the subject, which is demons, is in the plural. So how do we know that? Well, just take a look at the article in front. We've just learned our neuter plural articles, which can be ta in the nominative and the accusative. So yeah, it's functioning in the nominative because it's the subject of the sentence. So because that is plural, the noun is also going to be plural. So that's why we translate it as demons. And Concord tells us that the verb will agree with the subject in both person and number. So is that true? Well, look at the ending of this verb, pisteusin. Where does that ending come from? It comes from our present active indicative. Remember from the previous lesson, let's go through them again. Luo, luais, luai, luamen, lueta, luusin. So this is a third person plural. Third person plural. So there is agreement between the verb and the subject in person and number, and therefore we have concord. The second term that I want to explain to you is discord, or otherwise known as the animals run rule. So it says there are occasions, however, when the subject and the verb do not agree. So when they don't agree, that's known as discord. The second point, perhaps the most common example of discord is when a neuter plural subject takes a singular verb. In brackets, Greek grammarians referred to this rule as the animals run, the ta zoa treke, which was itself an example of the rule. Well, here's an example again from James, specifically James 3 verse 4, where James says, "Look also at the ships, although they are very large and are driven by harsh winds, they are being guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the captain wishes." Now, we would expect that because the subject is plural, ships, that we would have a verb ending that is also plural, right? However, with discord, we have a plural subject, specifically a neuter plural subject with a singular verb. So take a look at the Greek here. The subject there is ploia, which is ships, and that is a neuter plural subject. And because it's a neuter plural subject, it's going to take a singular verb, which is true here. We have metagatai. Metagatai, where does that ending etai come from? Well, it comes from our middle passive verb endings, which you've just learned in this lesson. Remember, luamai, lue, luetai. So this is a third person singular. All right, so there is our animals run rule. So when there is not agreement between the subject and the verb, that is called discord, and when there is agreement, we have concord. All right, let's have a look at our vocab for lesson 4. I'm going to begin with the postpositive. So that is the word gar, de, and un. So gar, de, and un. These are words that are called postpositives. So what is a postpositive? It's a Greek word that cannot stand first in its clause, although it is usually translated first in an English clause. All right, so we would translate for, but, then, or therefore as placing those words at the front of the sentence. But in Greek, you'll never find gar, de, and un at the front of the sentence. Good, let's carry on. Our third word here, which is a noun, is doulos ha, which means slave or servant. Then we've got a, which means if. Then we have n, and this is a preposition. It means in, and it takes its object in the dative case. Then we have another noun. This now is a neuter declension noun. So we have ergon ta, and that means work. Next we have hieron ta means temple. Then we have hoti, it means that or because. We've done un. Let's move on to the next one. Ox los ha, and that means crowd. Then we have semeion ta, and that means sign. And then you should be familiar with the next one. Teknon ta is child. And then finally we finish with a preposition hooper, and that can mean by, in the if it's in the genitive, and under if it has an object in the accusative. Right, so just be aware of those two alternatives there. Before we delve into our translation work, let me remind you of what the term passing means. So it says to pass a noun, pronoun, adjective, or verb, give the identifying details that specify the grammatical form of the word. So when we pass verbs, we give the following information in the following order: the tense, voice, mood, person, number, and the source. And then when we pass nouns, pronouns, or adjectives, we give the following information in this order: the part of speech, the case, gender, number, and lexical form. All right, so we will practice passing using a passing sheet. All right, let's do some translation work together. I'll read the Greek text for us first, and then we'll pass each word together. So it says, hoi, lagoi, tu, theu, graphontai, en, to, urano. So I've taken the liberty to fill in the information for us. Let's just quickly go through it together. Hoi is an article. It's in the nominative case. Its gender is masculine and its number is plural. The lexical form is ha. So that, can you see there, it modifies lagoi. And so we know that the article will always agree with the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, and case. So let's have a look there. The article is nominative, so the noun is nominative. The gender is masculine, so the noun is masculine. And because it's plural, the noun is plural. And that comes from logos. So there we have the, and we have logos in the plural form words, the words. Next, we have another set of articles and nouns. This article is genitive, masculine, plural, and that agrees with the noun that it's modifying, which is also gender, masculine, plural, and that comes from theos, which is God. Now we have a verb, graphontai, which is tense, present, voice, can be middle or passive. All right, so we've got to give both forms, because remember the forms are the same. The mood is indicative. The person, it's third person plural, and it comes from grapho. So I want to point out to you our subject, because it's in the nominative case, is the words. Because it's plural, here we've got a verb ending that is plural. So we have concord. Yes, those terms that we learned previously. There's agreement between the verb and the subject in person and number. All right, let's carry on. Here we have en, which is a preposition. And why do I say dative? Because we know that en takes its object in the dative case. That's why I wrote dative there. So look there. To, the article, is in the dative case. It's a masculine, singular. And the noun that it's modifying is also dative, singular, masculine, and that is uranos, which is heaven. So based on this information, let's now translate this verse. So we have hoi lagoi, which is the words, and then we have tu theu, because it's in the genitive, it's indicating possession, so we use the word of to show possession, the words of God. And then we have graphontai. There's our information. It's third person plural, and it's present, so we need to use the imperfective verbal aspect. So the words of God are, now I'm going to use the passive voice, all right, because words can't write themselves. So the words of God are being written. Where they're being written? in to urano, in heaven. Right, if I'd used the middle voice for graphantai, it would have said the words of God are writing for themselves in heaven, which wouldn't make sense. So that's why I'm using the passive voice. So we say the words of God are being written. Where? In heaven. Let's do one more translation together. So I'll read the Greek text first. It says, ta tekna blepe tous oklus. Alright, so I've taken the liberty once again, just to save time, of writing out the information for us. So we have all our words of the sentence lined up for passing. Alright, so ta is a article. It's a nominative, neuter, plural from ta. Alright, so we know that the article will agree with the noun that it's modifying in gender, number, and case. So let's see if that's true. Our noun is tekna. So it also is a nominative, neuter, plural from teknon. So that is the children. Then we have a verb, blepe. And that is a present. It's an active voice, indicative, third person singular from blepo. So this is interesting. Here we have our subject, because it's in the nominative case, is plural, but we have a verb that has a singular ending. So what does that tell us? That is an example of discord. Why? Because the subject is a neuter plural subject, and that takes a singular verb ending. And then finally, we have tous, which is an article. It's an accusative, masculine plural, and the noun oklos is also accusative, masculine plural, and that means crowd. So let's translate this verse together. So ta tekna, let me just find the right color here, is the children. Blepe, the children are seeing. Who are they seeing? The crowds. Alright, so seeing is a transitive verb and it requires a direct object. So our direct object in the accusative case is the crowds. The children are seeing the crowds.